It all began one quiet evening at a friend's rooftop dinner. The city lights twinkled below as laughter and soft music filled the air. I stood by the railing, clutching my drink, half listening to the conversations around me while my mind wandered elsewhere. That's when I noticed him, standing across the terrace, leaning casually against the wall, his eyes scanning the crowd as though searching for something or someone. Our eyes met briefly, and he smiled, the kind of smile that feels private even in a room full of people. Moments later, he walked over. "You look like you don't belong here either," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. I laughed despite myself. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who feels the same," he replied. His name was Ayaan. There was something disarming about the way he spoke, a quiet confidence that made you want to listen. We spent the rest of the evening in our little corner, talking about books, music, regrets, and dreams we didn't dare say aloud. He was easy to talk to, too easy. When it was time to leave, he looked at me for a long moment, as though weighing his next words carefully. Then he said something that lodged itself in my chest like a secret promise. "If I ever open my heart again, I'll start with you. Only you." I didn't know how to respond. The weight of his words caught me off guard, but in his eyes I saw sincerity, or at least I thought I did. I just nodded, and he smiled again, the kind of smile that makes you believe in impossible things. Over the next few weeks, he stayed true to his word. Texts turned into phone calls. Phone calls turned into late-night walks through quiet streets, sharing stories no one else knew. He'd show up outside my workplace with coffee, just because. He made me feel seen, like I was finally enough. At first, I told myself to be cautious. I'd been let down before, and falling for someone's words was a mistake I'd sworn not to repeat. But Ayaan had a way of making it feel safe to hope again. His attention was steady, his charm effortless. He always knew the right thing to say, as though he could read my thoughts before I spoke them. And little by little, my walls began to crumble. One evening, under a sky heavy with stars, he took my hand and asked softly, "So, can I start with you now?" I hesitated for only a heartbeat before I whispered back, "Yes." And in that moment, I believed him. I believed every word. Saying yes to Ayaan felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. From that night on, we became inseparable, orbiting each other's lives as though nothing else mattered. Every morning began with his messages, short, warm, and thoughtful. "Good luck with your meeting today. Don't forget lunch. Thinking of you." They seemed trivial at first, but over time, they became something I couldn't imagine going without. On weekends, we wandered through markets and parks, hand in hand, making up stories about strangers we passed. He liked to make me laugh, really laugh, the kind that leaves you breathless and lightheaded. His presence was steady, like an anchor in the restless sea of my life. Ayaan had a way of making everything feel special. Once, he showed up at my door with a paper bag of samosas and said, "I remembered you said these remind you of home." Another time, he walked an hour in the rain just to bring me an umbrella. He even introduced me to his friends one evening over dinner. They were warm and welcoming, teasing him for smiling too much when I spoke. One of them, a woman named Zara, pulled me aside and said, "We've never seen him like this. He's different with you." And I believed it. I began to imagine a future with him, something I'd never dared do with anyone before. Late at night, he would whisper, "We should take that road trip you've always wanted. Just you and me. Or, one day you'll see. I'll build you a home you'll never want to leave." But beneath the laughter and soft words, there were moments that didn't quite fit. Sometimes his phone would buzz late at night, and he'd silence it without looking. When I'd ask who it was, he'd smile faintly and say, "Work stuff. Nothing important." Other times, he would vanish for hours, claiming meetings or errands, and return with the same easy charm that made me feel silly for even questioning him. One night, as we sat on a park bench, I finally asked, "You tell me if there was something or someone else, right?" He turned to me, his eyes dark and unreadable for just a moment before he softened. "You're all there is," he said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I wanted to believe him. So I did. As he leaned in to kiss me, My doubts melted away. I told myself the little things didn't matter, that love meant trust. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "What if you're wrong?" And though I ignored it then, that question stayed with me, waiting for its answer. It was a Friday evening when everything began to unravel. I'd spent the whole day thinking of Ayaan, remembering how he'd promised to pick me up for dinner. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, his messages slowed, then stopped altogether. At first, I told myself he was busy, maybe stuck at work. Yet, as the hours stretched on, unease coiled in my stomach. By 9, I couldn't sit still any longer. On impulse, I decided to surprise him, to bring his favorite dessert and wait outside his apartment. It felt like a romantic gesture, a reminder of what we shared. When I arrived at his building, the street was quiet, his windows glowing warmly against the night. My heart hammered in my chest as I climbed the stairs, the box of pastries balanced in my hands. I knocked gently, smiling to myself at the thought of his reaction. The door opened, but it wasn't Ayaan who stood there. It was a woman. She was beautiful, with dark hair falling over her shoulders, wearing one of his shirts like it belonged to her. She regarded me with polite curiosity, tilting her head slightly. "You must be his coworker," she said. "Come in." Her words rang in my ears as I stepped inside, my legs moving before my mind caught up. There he was, Ayaan, sitting on the couch, laughing at something on his phone, completely at ease. But when he looked up and saw me, his smile froze. "Hey," I managed to say, though my voice cracked on the word. The woman closed the door behind me, resting her hand casually on his shoulder as she asked, "Babe, who's this?"
Babe.
I felt my throat tighten as I stared at him, searching his face for answers. He stood slowly, slipping out from under her touch, his expression unreadable. "It's not what you think," he began, his voice low, almost pleading. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Really? Because it looks exactly like what I think." The woman glanced between us, confusion clouding her features. Ayaan ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he muttered. "I told her the same things I told you. I thought I could choose." I stared at him, the weight of his confession sinking like stones in my chest. All those promises, all those whispered words, shared, recycled, given to another. My fingers loosened around the box of pastries, letting it fall to the floor. Without another word, I turned and walked out, my vision blurred by tears I refused to let him see. In the silence of my car, I gripped the steering wheel and whispered to myself, how could he tell me he'd start with me, when he'd already started with someone else? The days that followed were a blur of silence and shadows. I avoided calls, ignored messages, and pulled the curtains tight against the world outside. Every corner of my room felt heavy with his presence, the way he used to smile at me, the sound of his voice saying my name. The memories replayed like cruel little films, over and over, until I thought I'd drown in them. There were moments I almost picked up the phone, almost typed his name into my screen. But something always stopped me. The image of him on that couch, with her by his side, her hand resting where mine used to be. That was the truth now. And no amount of wishing could change it. Slowly, I began to claw my way back. The first thing I did was delete his number. Not just from my phone, but from my mind. Each time the thought of him crept in, I forced myself to think of something else, a book I'd meant to finish, a recipe I'd wanted to try. Anything but him. I started walking every evening, letting the chill air sting my skin, letting the city's noise remind me that life went on even when hearts broke. Some nights, when the loneliness felt too loud, I called my best friend. She would listen without judgment, and her quiet reassurances became the bridge that carried me through those dark hours. With time, I found myself smiling again. I joined a book club at a little cafe downtown. I signed up for a weekend painting class. I booked a solo trip to a seaside town and stood at the shore, feeling small in the best possible way. I realized, slowly, that his betrayal wasn't about me. It was about him. His choices didn't make me less. His lies didn't make me unworthy. I learned that healing isn't loud. It's quiet and stubborn. It's choosing every single day to stand back up even when your knees shake. One morning, as I sipped coffee by my window, I caught sight of my reflection. And for the first time in months, I didn't see the girl he broke. I saw someone stronger. I thought back to that night on the rooftop. The way he'd said, "If I ever open my heart again, I'll start with you." And now I finally understood. I didn't need someone else to start with me. I needed to start with myself.
So I did.
And someday, I know I'll meet someone who truly chooses me, without conditions, without lies. But until then, I'll keep choosing me. Every single time.